Sphene may be the savior of Final Fantasy XIV. Let me explain. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and the more time passes, the more I think I just absolutely love the MSQ in 7.2. And like, the more that I like it. And I think a massive reason why, and I think a lot of people share my sentiment on this, is because of how well written the character of Sphene was. And in a lot of ways, it felt like such a stark departure from what we've had in this game with Dawntrail up to this point in time. And what I specifically mean by the title of this video, that Sphene is the savior of Final Fantasy XIV, is that I think this character in particular has, and potentially can still, reignite a lot of passion for the story of Final Fantasy XIV after what is considered by a lot of people to be lackluster to even bad MSQs for the last good while here. And a lot of this sentiment that I'm seeing, at least in my own comment section, in my own personal experience, is that a lot of the recent positivity is centered around the character of Sphene specifically. Whereas I think Wuklamah taking the main character role for 7.0 and for parts of 7.1, and because she was in this big central pivotal role, she kind of exemplifies a lot of the writing issues specifically that I have with Dawntrail. I think the same logic applies for Sphene when it comes to 7.2. Just in terms of how the story handles characterization, character development, and emotional intrigue, I think it's best exemplified through the character of Sphene for 7.2 and why 7.2 is seemingly so well received by so many people now. I think this stuff does matter a lot for a lot of people. We've talked about before on this channel, and I don't think I use these words specifically, but the same logic applies, how Final Fantasy XIV's story is like a load-bearing wall for the game. How every element and pillar of this game, for the most part, is built up and supported by how solid and great the story is. So if the story itself falls apart and people's faith in the story and storytelling falls apart, a lot of that structure goes alongside it. And I think we saw this a lot when it came to Dawntrail's release, while also being coupled with like little in the way of actual new content outside of instance-based content. The vast majority of negative sentiment I personally saw from people in response to 7.0 and 7.1 came down to two elements: story and job design. And trust me when I say this, as someone who has played MMOs for most of my life, you will never manage to perfectly execute for every single individual on these elements. There will always be people that are unsatisfied with the current direction or the current execution. But I think it's fair to say that Dawntrail in particular was more disliked by more people than on average for Final Fantasy XIV. But also, people warm up to things just differently. For me, I just need you to show me that it can be better, and I think that's what I got with 7.2. But for some other people, they need a little bit more. 7.2 in a lot of its narrative structure was a lot of setup and build-up. It was good build-up and setup, unlike 7.0 and 7.1 for me, but some people may require, and I think to some degree I do as well, an entire completed arc that is satisfying and engaging. I think a lot of people will need 7.3. Because 7.3 is set up to be this big climactic finale for the story of Dawntrail. If you can execute that patch with the same level of quality that we saw in 7.2, if not even better, then I think we'll see even more people come around to the current state of Final Fantasy XIV than who already are with 7.2. And again, Sphene is the face of this, because she's the main character alongside the Warrior of Light right now. So she directly benefits from essentially being a new character because of how her story is set up. But she benefits from the better pacing, she benefits from the better dialogue, the better execution, the better choreography, the better cinematography. In my opinion, the better facial animations we got in 7.2 than what I personally saw out of 7.1 and 7.0. We essentially get a beginning and a middle, and we're right near the end of this character arc for Sphene with 7.2, and it was well paced and well executed, while also building off the bits of development that we got for Sphene with Endless Sphene in 7.0, which in my opinion was one of the highlights of 7.0. It wasn't for a lot of people, but for me and for quite a few other people, Sphene was one of the highlights of 7.0. You have to stick the landing with 7.3, and now I'm firmly of the opinion that they're going to take Sphene into the future. I just don't see a world where she just like gets relegated to Americ status after 7.3. I don't see that at all. It absolutely 1000% feels to me like they're building her up to be this new main party member going into the future. Maybe they put her on ice for an expansion. I kind of doubt they will. I think she's just going to get like summoner or like scholar abilities and be added as a trust, move with us into 8.0. I think that's the plan. I think that's the direction. I think it's the right one as well. Because I think for a lot of people, we were expecting nothing to come out of Dawntrail that we would really like to remember. And for a lot of people, we just wanted to put Dawntrail in the rear view mirror as fast as humanly possible and move on to a new story and for something else. What Sphene allows the story to do is to recontextualize Dawntrail to not be necessarily remembered as only Wooklamot's story entirely, but also Sphene's. And that allows people who are either consciously aware of this or subconsciously aware. If you weren't a fan of Dawntrail up to this point in time, which again is a lot of people, Dawntrail has its defenders, but for the people that didn't like Dawntrail or were just disappointed, having a character that is as well written as Sphene allows you to get something good out of Dawntrail and to not feel as if your time was inherently wasted on something you didn't like. That kind of legacy can leave irreparable harm, but just getting something good to look back on in regards to Dawntrail fondly, and to say, you know what, that was pretty alright. Yeah, Dawntrail had its issues, but we got Sphene out of the deal, so it's pretty cool. That feeling is important, and I think people on some level will feel that going into the future, especially as we put more distance behind us going into the future from Dawntrail. As more expansions come online, and assuming Sphene is alongside us for the ride, if they continue to build up that character to make us fall in love with that character, I think more and more people will be like, you know what, maybe Dawntrail wasn't all that bad. I will always have my issues with it, that I've covered extensively on this channel, right? It's no secret. But just getting that feeling that something good can come out of this, that is such an important element for Dawntrail to hit, because I don't think it was on the track to do that. Think back to Stormblood. There were a lot of people that were unsatisfied with that storyline, but we got some great characters out of it. So a lot of people may look back fondly on Stormblood because of characters like Gosetsu, Yotsuyu, or Fidola, or the entire patch story leading into Shadowbringers. Throw wide the gates. That kind of stuff is so important. And I think this goes back to an element of Final Fantasy XIV's writing that I've talked about for the longest time. It's the inherent power to completely change minds about a character or a setting with just one patch. They did it before with Elidibus in 5.3. They did it before with the Warriors of Darkness back in Shadowbringers. They were not that well liked when they were introduced in Heavensward. I thought they were kind of a bunch of jobbers. Then you make me fall in love with them with Shadowbringers. And I think Sphene is a great example of this. I kind of like the character even in 7.0 with the Endless Sphene. But with 7.2, I think a lot more people came around to loving this character. That is a powerful thing, and that is a powerful element to realign interest in the game. And there's a lot of good PR down the line they could just drum up and have Sphene be like the focal point of it. Because they needed a new character to represent this new era of Final Fantasy XIV story after this Heidelin and Zodiac arc. They needed a new character, but they needed that character to be well liked. I liked Zero, but she was a bit divisive. Golbez is a Final Fantasy IV reference. Wooklamot has to defend us, but I think it's safe to say on the whole, not that particularly well-liked of a character. Sphene is this. And imagine how hype it could be if they reveal that summoners get the Ramuh Eggy because Sphene is a summoner and she summons in Ramuh. How cool would that be as a moment? How much good PR can you just hoist upon Sphene's shoulders for free? Because it's seemingly likely they're going to make Sphene either a summoner or a scholar, probably both for trusts. And since Sphene is a massive reference to Garnet from FF9, and the first icon that Garnet acquired in FF9 was Ramuh, so think of it. Imagine the 8.0 cinematic comes around. We're looking forward to a new story. They stuck the landing with 7.3, and in 8.0 cinematic we see Sphene summon in a Ramuh Eggy. How cool would that be? A summon that summoners have been crying out for the longest time, but we got Solar Bahamut for some reason in Dawntrail, which honestly is a bit of a microcosm for Dawntrail when you think about it. That's just attaching even more good PR onto the shoulders of a character that's kind of representing a vibe shift for Final Fantasy XIV right now, and that is Sphene. She is front and center. She is in this spotlight pivotal role for the game right now. And they may or may not do that 8.0 summoner Ramuh Aggie reveal thing, because who knows, that may just be a thing in 7.3, or 0.4, or 0.5, who knows, right? But like, if they ever do that reveal, that we're going to get a Ramuh Aggie because Sphene is able to summon one in, how cool would that be, dude? It would be kind of funny if they just, like, never did that. Or better yet, she just comes around to the idea, yeah, I can't do magic anymore, I'm gonna pick up this gun and become a machinist. Like, that would be funny, but let's be realistic for a second here, right? They were clearly building Sphene up to be either a scholar or a summoner, particularly a healer, throughout 7.2. I think having her be both makes the most sense because that's kind of the role Garnet was in FF9. Also makes it more flexible for, you know, trusts. But right when Final Fantasy XIV needed a new face, it needed someone to point to and say, you care about this character, you want to see what happens to this character, you want to see where this character goes, they stuck the landing with Sphene. It was a buzzer beater, half-court, 3 to win the game. It's what they needed. They still need to stick the landing with 7.3, absolutely, but if the storytelling qualities anywhere in the ballpark of 7.2, I think it's good. I went from being pretty much largely disinterested with the story of Final Fantasy XIV to being absolutely invested again. That is the power of a singular great patch. And I think the story is getting way better right at the right time. Like, 7.2 needed to be the patch that was good, because we have things like Cosmic Exploration coming online in like a week or two. We have the Occult Crescent coming online in late May. Those are new pieces, well, new in quotation marks, pieces of endgame content coming online for Final Fantasy XIV. To round out that lack of content issue a lot of people had for Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, but if the story wasn't good for them, that would undermine a lot of what they set out to do, because what we talked about before, the story for Final Fantasy XIV and the way the game is structured right now, the story is a load-bearing wall. But if the load-bearing wall is structurally sound, then we're good. We can have quite a nice house surrounding that load-bearing wall, because not only was the MSQ story good, but also the Arcadian. It's what I talked about before. A lot of people will just point to Sphene and say that's a really good character, but because of the role she was in, much similar to Wu Clement in 7.0, she exemplifies the writing style of that story, because she has so much spotlight, she has so much screen time. So if the story is well written, of course that character would be well written since she's a massive part of the story. But I think it serves to exemplify the style of story is far more interesting than what they've been doing for the last good while here. Because the Arcadian story was also really good, and Sphene wasn't anywhere in that. So if this style of story can also find its way into Cosmic Exploration, into the Occult Crescent, that makes those pieces of content even more interesting, particularly with Occult Crescent because of the nature of the story it's dealing with. The War of the Magi, that entire element of the story is really interesting and fascinating. You take that one explorer character from Dawntrail, who is seemingly a big traveling companion for the Occult Crescent, and he was such a nothing burger in 7.0, I don't even remember his name. It's the Rogadin with the blue, like, coat thing. They faked this out in regards to his death. Imagine they turn him into a beloved character because of the Occult Crescent, with a more focused, more well-paced, better executed storyline. 7.2's MSQ showcased they can still write a story that a lot of people will fall in love with and want to see more of. And in a lot of ways, we were complaining, rightfully so in my opinion, about the release cadence for content for Dawntrail and for Final Fantasy XIV on the whole, right? Occult Crescent and Cosmic Exploration should have come online way early in the expansion, but I've talked about this particular element before. But think of it like this. Since they do come a bit after 7.2's MSQ, who else is more hyped for these pieces of content and what the story could offer? Because your opinions on the current story of Final Fantasy XIV, the current writing, is way better and more enhanced because of 7.2's MSQ. It's kind of funny how that worked out, isn't it? I think for a lot of people, they were ready to settle on the idea that 7.x would be forgotten down the line. Would just be, let's get out of this, let's get away from it, let's turn our back to it. It's like a moldy sandwich in the corner of the room. If we just ignore it, it's not there, right? Just get us to 8.0, get us to a new storyline, win me over with that, and we're good. But, like I talked about before in this video, with a character like Sphene, that was as well written as she was in 7.2, if they continue to stick the landing with 7.3, 0.4, 0.5, we can look back on Dawntrail and be like, you know what? All in all, I'm glad it happened, because we got this beloved character out of it. That is a really important element, so we don't just have this gaping hole in our memories when it concerns Final Fantasy XIV, and be like, dude, Shadowbringers, that was awesome, Stormblood, hit or miss, but overall really cool, loved Heaven's Sword, Endwalker was incredible, Dawntrail. But then 8.0, right? Now it could be like, yeah, Dawntrail had its issues, but we got Sphene out of it. And that is a character that is a blank slate going into the future, because you can do whatever with that character, and you can just take that character places. I think this is a character people want more time with, want to see more of, and are more interested in the story because of her direct inclusion in it. And it's a great way to recontextualize a lot of scenes that may not have hit that hard upon an initial viewing or play, and just be like, oh, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? Oh, how, like, Endless Sphene never asked for our help, and believed she had to do it all her own, and how our Sphene asked for our help at the end of 7.2. That's kind of sweet, isn't it? Just little moments like that. That kind of stuff is so important, in my opinion, and I think it'll become more important as time passes and we put more distance between 7.0, 0.1, and 0.2 and us. Because this is an entire topic that I don't think becomes increasingly or abundantly obvious initially. It's something that, like, over time, I think we'll all grow to appreciate. Because for a lot of us, right, we will never have to play Dawntrail again, right? We just won't have to. We'll never have to do 7.0 or 0.1 again, because we've been there, done that. But if we keep the one great thing around, I see that as a win, and a great way to get a win out of a pretty crappy situation. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment down below with if there's been another moment in Final Fantasy XIV for you where you didn't really like it that much when you first played through it or you first saw it, but later down the line you grew to appreciate it. I would love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives on this. For me, it's Xenos. I didn't actually like the character all that much back in 0.0, and I grew to love the character as much as I do now. So with that, stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.